Hi, I'm Marco.
And I'm Heather.
We invite you on a journey of discovery as we explore techniques, tools, and inspiration to better our love lives and our sex lives.
Join us as we travel the world, seeking out the stories that can help improve how we do romance and relationships.
Come with us as we discover
How to love forever.
Hey, welcome to the podcast.
Yes. Wow, this is great. We're getting two. We're like happening. It's happening. I don't know what's happening. I think I'm probably just going to cut this part out. Mm-hmm. I'm the guy that edits, by the way.
So, welcome to How to Love Forever,
Yes.
the podcast that focuses on relationship dynamics and healthy sex lives and all that good yumminess.
Yes.
And today we are doing a general overview of the 5 love languages.
Yes.
How to express heartfelt commitment to your mate.
Yes.
All that. So it's a book. I'm sure so many of you are familiar with it. And even if you are, this podcast is great because it's going to kind of do that overview we're talking about and give you some ideas for how to utilize it in your own lives.
And this is something that we hope to be doing with a lot of regularity, bringing you resources that you can utilize. I have no idea what I'm saying. I'm probably just going to edit myself out of like absolutely everything today. It's going to be good. It's going to be the Heather show.
So you can be my support.
I'll just be the guy with the buttons on the keyboard. Clickety clack. There, I disappeared.
So yeah, essentially what we want to do with this podcast is, among other things, talking with professionals, understanding the variety of ways that love can be expressed in a healthy fashion, is essentially curating great information and resources to hopefully help others live their lives with lots of fulfillment and great connection.
Say, for example, Dr. Gary Chapman's 5 Love Languages.
The book was released in '92, but he, in addition to being an author, is a marriage counselor, a director of marriage seminars, and apparently a pastor, on top of being a doctor.
Wow, that guy's busy.
Yeah, I hope he gets busy.
Well, I hope he does get busy too.
If
Sometimes.
he utilizes all those languages.
Yeah, absolutely. All of those languages all at once. Oh, wow, that guy can speak in tongues.
So, yeah, it's a very popular book. I found this fascinating because apparently the publisher didn't expect it to do nearly as well as it did. It only sold 8,500 copies. That's 8,500 copies in the first year, but it's 4 times what the publisher expected.
Man, 8,500 copies is not a lot. Like my high school graduating class was 4,000 people. So that's like 2 graduating classes worth of one high school in an urban environment.
Of books that
books.
that is now blown up because the following year it sold 17,000. 2 years after that, 137,000, and it's been on the New York Times bestseller list since August of 2009. It came out in '92. Like, this is a long-running resource that people have found a lot of value from, and I think that's fantastic.
It's coming up on 20 years out there, 30 years out there.
30.
Oh my gosh, it's coming up on 30 years.
Marco, you can math.
Have I mentioned that Heather does the numbers and the people? I just do the colors and the shapes.
And editing his shapes. So let's jump right into it, shall we?
Absolutely. Well, the thing I also wanted to say about the 5 love languages is that since he wrote his in '92, he's created other versions of the book for people with different social environments. So the 5 love languages, the original book, was like for people in one-on-one relationships. Mm-hmm. But this unique perspective that he's got has been able to guide people through the interpersonal mazes in other social situations, like the workplace or relationships with your own children, for example. There's even a military edition I saw.
Really?
It helps. Yeah. It helps deployed families cope with like their very specific kinds of stress.
Wow, that's got to provide a lot of value for
Right?
people.
Yeah, that's what I thought. It shows that his method of explaining love communication, it hit a cultural bullseye. It really speaks to the, emotional spine of the country. Mm-hmm. So to me, I credit it for having been successful in that way. For people to catch on to it like that, it's got to be saying it in the right way.
It makes a lot of sense too, because based on all the patients that he's helped over the years, I know with the original book, he was looking at the consistent issues that patients were sharing, that essentially it felt as though their partner wasn't providing what they needed, wasn't showing love to them in the ways that they were craving. And it wasn't that their partner wasn't trying. It's just simply that each person speaks in a different language.
Right. So if like two genius philosophers in a marketplace, one of them is speaking Latin and the other one is speaking Greek, it doesn't mean that one of them's a dummy. They just definitely aren't going to be able to communicate.
And that is an analogy everyone can connect with. Yeah.
I only do shapes and colors.
Oh, I liked it.
No, but it's true. I mean, the way you say it is right. That folks really do have a different way to see the world. I mean, everyone has a different way to see the world around them and to interact with it. And so it's no wonder that they also give and receive in a multitude of ways. They give and receive love in a multitude of ways. And so when you appreciate an individual in your life, you know, one of the best strategies to do is to strive to accommodate their uniqueness into your life. And part of that uniqueness is going to be how they communicate their love. And so this is more easily achieved if you have access to a roadmap like the 5 love languages.
Absolutely.
It can be other roadmaps, but
Sure.
This one is apparently really effectively communicated.
It does seem to be fairly all-encompassing.
It's a good
Again,
model.
just simplifies it to a point where you have a place to start. Obviously, there's so much more to a relationship than understanding what your love languages are and finding ways to connect with your partner in a way that they appreciate and it resonates with them. But it's a really good place to start.
Absolutely. It's one of the foundational notions is knowing what language to speak whenever you're wanting to communicate.
Fancy that, huh?
Imagine that. Shapes and colors, baby.
I love it. I love it.
So what are the 5 love languages then?
Just a real quick overview. The 5 love languages are acts of service, receiving gifts, quality time, words of affirmation, and physical touch.
Wow. Well, let's run through them because I'm pretty sure that you've got some lovely examples and I can blab about it.
Great. Absolutely.
So acts of service. Love language number 1, let's just say that. Not that they're in any hierarchical order, but that's just the list. That means doing helpful things for your partner.
Absolutely. It does mean doing helpful things for your partner, but it comes down to helpful things that your partner sees as helpful, right? So for me, this is definitely, I think this is probably my top love language. It's been a minute since I did the online quiz to figure out my own love languages. But yeah, acts of service. It is finding ways to recognize what your partner is dealing with and looking at how many things are on their plate and what you can do to relieve some of the burden, right? Taking some of those onerous tasks off their hands.
So someone who has this as their primary language then probably feels most appreciated by their partner when said partner goes out of their way to do something for them, particularly if it lightens their load.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain that's what I just said.
Yeah?
But like what sorts of things? For example, like when you see me dealing with like a full day of madness, what are the sorts of things that you look at and you say, you know what? I love her. I'm going to help her. What can I do that fits my skill set and is going to make her life easier?
Well, there's a few things. For example, okay, you have this capacity and this propensity toward doing a lot of chores all in one day, getting like this blast of stuff done. Usually you come home exhausted and you come home laden with like bags and bags of groceries, for example. So I tend to want to have the house relatively clean when you get back because that helps like reduce the level of chaos in your life. That helps with, you know, if you have a ton of bags in the car or whatever, I go out of my way to be available to help bring them into the house, especially if it's big jugs of water or whatever. And that helps you because you're usually like way past tired by the time you get home. You are done. And the same thing when you take a trip outside. If you're taking a trip out of town for work or for family or whatever, full disclosure, I slob out. I totally dude out, and I spend like, oh yeah, my first day of freedom just being like absolutely like lazy at home, letting the dishes pile up, letting YouTube run on the television, and just basically doing nothing productive whatsoever. Just taking advantage of the fact that you're not at the house and not going to be bothered by it,
Yeah, well, it's good to have some me time where you don't
Right.
have to worry about anything else.
But yeah, so I'm taking my me time. But by the time you're getting home, say 2 or 3 days later, usually on the day that you're traveling back, I am cleaning up the house and making sure that traces of my disgusting male propensity towards sloth on the couch are all gone, So that way you come home to as pretty a home as I can make it, and you tend to enjoy that. You appreciate that. And that's the thing I do for you, because obviously for me, it would just be like my hair's everywhere, hanging bath towels off the stairs and wiring all over the place and 18 projects on the coffee table, tools. So anyway, that's the kind of thing, I suppose, is cleaning up after myself. It's an act of service. It kind of, maybe not. Is it an act of service, or is it just a way to keep myself from getting in trouble?
Yes. I'm going to go with all the above, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
And from my perspective, I know exactly what happens when I'm gone. I still see the signs. I see you rushing around, usually trying to finish up the last little details. And, you definitely don't get everything.
I do get into my projects.
When I get back from a trip and I know what you've been getting up to, and I'm happy, I'm so happy that you've had a chance to slob out and enjoy life as a quote unquote bachelor for a few days and just do your I don't need to worry about stuff kind of Marco life. But I absolutely love, and traveling as much as I love it, we all know it's exhausting and there's usually chaos, and it could be a super long travel day. And maybe it was a really long, exhausting trip for whatever reason. And coming back to my sanctuary, because that's how I look at my home, at our home, is a sanctuary, wherever our home is. Coming back after all that chaos to a space that, even if it's not 100% perfect with details and all that, the fact that it is welcoming, that it is peaceful, it's intentional. You create an intentional, welcoming space of peace for me to land in. And that, oh my gosh, it just squeezes my heart.
Well, thank you. In my ideal expression of it, I will have done the laundry, and in my most ideal expression of it, I will have some dinner ready for you. It's that kind of thing. I mean, I can't always get to all of those things, but I do strive for it because I know how good it makes you feel.
And that you really hit the bullseye.
Well, I totally appreciate what we do
Absolutely.
for each other. I mean, the things that we do best, obviously, like when you take care of all the paperwork and the finances, because I am an idiot at paperwork and finances. No, I'm serious. Listeners, I am the kind of guy that will have a lot of money in the bank and yet never pay his bills because I totally forget that I have bills.
It's true.
I just can't be bothered. And it's so stupid because my whole life I had the worst credit in the universe. And then I get together with Heather and she's like a whiz with numbers and she really gets off on it. So I was like, hot potato, you have it. And and it's because of her that I now have a credit score in the 800s. That's probably a first for my entire family, generationally speaking. So it's these are the things that I totally appreciate. It's the stuff that we do for each other that are sort of compensating for each other's lesser talents, as it were.
Sure.
You know, I do most of the home repairs, you do the paperwork, but also when we paint a room together, when you do the trim and I do the broad strokes, those are talents that jibe really well together. But acts of service don't just mean filling in for each other's lesser talents. It's service in general. Just yesterday, for example, you heard me complain about having a sore ankle. Last night you rubbed my feet. You just did it. Didn't announce it, didn't nothing. You just kind of sat down next to me and started. And that's feeling the love. That is the act of service that makes me feel loved. And so thanks for that.
Well, you're welcome. I love you. And when there is a need I can fill, and especially if it's not a requirement, I think that's another thing that kind of goes with the whole acts of service. It's a voluntary measure, it's a
Yeah.
voluntary act.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's not a demand. It's not a job.
Yeah.
It's not a marital obligation. It's
Right.
It's just an act of love. Dang it.
Yeah.
You know.
Oh, hey, I love you. Let me do this thing for you.
Yeah.
Does
Oh,
that help?
boy, does it. Hey, number 2, receiving gifts.
Yeah, gift giving.
Right. Let's talk about that.
So I am not much of a gift person. I mean, there have been times in my life, and I think too, it's important to note that love languages may ebb and flow depending on our personal life circumstances, our stages of life, who we're with, etc. But for me, especially now, receiving gifts is not really a big thing for me, not nearly to the point of acts of service. But there are a lot of people who it is their love language.
Yeah. Yeah. And it used to be my love language back when I was like 5 or whatever. Christmas was like, woo. But
Right.
but honestly, and I don't mean to say that anyone is infantile for liking to receive gifts. Obviously, that's not the case, because gifts come in so many forms than just toys or expensive junk. It is, and for some people, expensive things might be the thing that actually makes them feel loved. And so long as it isn't killing anyone, well, that's a love language, receiving gifts. Am I wrong?
No. I mean, it's true. There are, but what I was going to say is they don't have to be pricey or elaborate. As I was reading through this, because again, it not being my love language, it was a little more difficult for me to wrap my head around it and write about it. But apparently, for a lot of people, it's more about, hey, I was out and about doing my day, and you are constantly on my mind and in my heart when I'm going through my day. So I saw this thing and I thought of you, right? Or, for example, you are at the store and you're just buying like the usual things, but say your partner has a favorite brand of wine and that wine is on sale. So you're like, oh, well, let me get a couple of bottles because it's on sale and I know they'll really enjoy this.
That's kind of part gift giving and part act of service, isn't it? It's just that mindfulness, really.
Yeah, it's mindfulness,
And
for sure.
I guess that's where you and I are most compatible as well, because you are not much into the receiving of gifts as a love language, and I have always been sort of gift-giving challenged. I have a very... No, seriously. No, I have a very sort of pathologically independent kind of mindset. And so for me, I've never really felt very comfortable with getting gifts, like physical material gifts, because it always kind of feels like an obligation or something like that. It feels like, oh, geez, somebody kind of went like seriously out of their way to do this for me. And now I have to like, what do I do? It's a head fuck, you know? And so for me, like the giving of physical gifts is such an afterthought. Like I do not Christmas because of that, because in my brain, I think I have figured it out that in my brain, I'm like, well, I'm capable of getting the things I need for myself. So I'm just going to assume that everybody is that way too. And that's not even what the equation of gift giving is.
No, it's not.
But
yeah,
that's
it's not about necessity.
That's my brain. And to me, that just helps illustrate how much this is not my love language, just like it is not yours. Because like I don't even think of it in the proper way that someone for whom this is a love language would think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because I think when we first got together, it was more of a focus of mine, but that's also because of the circumstances that I had been in for all of my previous years, that giving gifts was an important thing to do. And, Christmas and birthdays were just crazy important in my family and with previous relationship. So when we started dating and I wanted to show you that I loved you by getting you gifts, it wasn't necessarily, it didn't get the result that I was looking for.
No, I was like, oh my God, obligation. What do I do? Brain fuck. Yeah.
But again, learning what your love language was. It wasn't receiving gifts. So cool. That made things a lot easier for me because I think maybe gift giving is not one of my primary brain processes.
Right. But for whom it is, like you're right. When you see that couple of bottles of wine for sale and it happens to be the favorite one of your loved one, you just think of it as a gift and you just bring it. I guess I think of it as an act of service. So in that sense, I suppose I do a little bit of the gift giving, so long as it's a practical gift, because that's when it becomes more of an act of service. It's like, oh, look, you bought me a new shampoo of the kind I really like. And it's like, yay. But, it's a gift, but it's also an act of service. So I guess that's where it lands for me in these two particular examples.
I was just thinking about how one of my girlfriends, her primary love language, and we'll talk about words of affirmation in a little bit, but her primary love language is words of affirmation, while his, I believe, is receiving gifts. He really loves to give and receive kind of fancy, thoughtful gifts. And that can stress her out a little bit when it comes to Christmas because, there are a lot of family members. It can be really stressful on the budget. But they've come to a good place with that. And it's just fascinating because you can tell how much he cares because he just wants to be so generous and so thoughtful.
Always lavishing her with gifts, and she's...
Well, and all their loved ones as well, like children and family members. And
well, I think it's lovely, regardless of whether I take part in that particular love language or not. Kind of nice.
It's just fascinating how all of our brains and psychological processes differ, really.
Yeah. Another big one that you and I do is number 3, which is quality time.
Oh, yeah.
You and I do so much quality time. In fact, quality time is sort of the foundation of our relationship. I mean, heck, we started this podcast because we just can't get enough of each other.
It's really important to
This is really trippy. Okay, listeners, I have had conversations with strangers or with workmates, things like that, about my relationship with Heather, our relationship together. And I explain to them sometimes how, we're independent performing artists. And so we have this little company. And sometimes we do state fairs. Sometimes we do music festivals. It requires us to travel. So we have a little touring van, and in this touring van, we will stuff all of our camping gear, all of our costume requirements for that particular performance, all of our props, whatever, and then we'll hit the road. And sometimes we have these contracts that take us out of town for like a month, and sometimes we are for days living in a little van, just sort of screwed in together into the 2 front seats with everything else is totally full.
Tiny little capsule, completely full of all of our gear.
Right. And then some other times we will rent a hotel room and be there for an entire month. And a hotel room's a hotel room. You've seen a hotel room. There is no private space. It's not an 8-bedroom hotel room with a backyard, okay? And so, it doesn't have its own...
even a 2-room suite.
It doesn't have its own garage.
What I would do for a 2-room suite sometimes.
There's no rooftop balcony that you can look out to the city and hang out by yourself. No. We're together. And sometimes these coworkers or these, other people that I meet that we're explaining this to, they look at me and they are dumbfounded. They're like, if I spent that much time with my old lady, we'd kill each other. And to me, that just talks about how quality time is our probably primary language. The presence of each other itself is the gift. The mutual presence is the gift. And so, some people are like that. And during this whole last couple of years, with the tragedy of the pandemic unfolding all around us, and for this entire, especially during the beginning of the pandemic, when everything really was very shut down, and we were seeing the effects of that kind of sort of in the media all around the country, of people that were stuck in their 1-bedroom apartments in Manhattan things like that. Yeah. And, so many relationships did not survive the pandemic. So many relationships, because the mixture, because the equation of how much time they spend together changed, and how much stress they had to deal with together changed. Those elements of the equation changed, and therefore a lot of relationships didn't survive. You and I, we glided through it like we were just getting coffee in the patio. It was pretty amazing because quality time together is a thing for us. So when we were shut out of the rest of society, then we turned to nothing but each other. I feel we actually kind of thrived a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of terrible to say for all of the people who suffered and for the
I'm
tragedy
certainly,
that still is the COVID-19 pandemic. We're
Yeah.
still dealing with
and
it
I'm not
on a
discounting the
global
fact.
scale.
Yeah, and I'm not discounting the fact that there was
Right.
it is a tragedy, and that people have died, and that tons more have suffered. I'm just saying that within that context, we were one of the lucky ones, and we were the lucky among the lucky because we just thrived as a couple together. We did more things together. We became an even stronger support team for each other.
Partnership. Yeah.
Partnership, yeah.
Totally. Well, and you're talking about all the ways that we are fortunate. I mean, obviously having our primary or one of our primary love languages, because honestly, I can't tell if quality time or acts of service is my top, but it might depend on the day. We're fortunate that that's our primary love language, and also that we already had such a solid foundation of communication and mutual respect for each other and knowing how to honor each other's personal space within close quarters, right? But also the ways that we spend quality time together. You were talking about how we paint a room. We do a lot of projects together. And I think this is something that a lot of people can put into practice in their own lives. Maybe not doing home renovation sort of projects because not everybody owns a home or that falls within their skill sets anyway.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't even wired that way.
But there are all sorts of things that you can do with your partner, finding something in common that you can both create and build together.
Yeah.
I think people do that with children. They're both like all about being parents and like the child is their creative project or children. Great. Those are the kinds of parents that should be having children.
Yes, this is not an endorsement, dear listeners, for having children just for the sake of having something to do with your partner. This is an endorsement of having children if that is your burning desire and if that is also your partner's burning desire.
Indeed.
Kids are not a good project just because you're idle. For one thing, it takes way too long and is very expensive. You might as well just get a yacht.
Okay, snarky.
No, but you're right. And, committing to quality time doesn't really just mean spending time in the same space, but it is about how you spend time in the same space, how you're truly present, how you really listen. Maybe, share a lot of eye contact, ignoring other distractions. I mean, just because you're sitting in the same room doesn't mean you're having quality time. You could just both be looking at your phones, which is sometimes necessary, but that's not the quality part of the quality time.
No, it's not.
It doesn't have to be walking through the park hand in hand with a cotton candy either. It's whatever it is that both of you value together as an activity and doing it together.
Yep.
You and I, for example, we rock out on karaoke because we're that kind of dweeb.
Oh man, we had the best parties for two during the lockdown. We set up the party.
Again, our respects to the people who suffered, but yes, we had a great time just being by ourselves, parties for two.
Well, being isolated and not being able to really go and interact with the world at large, and we're performers, so we performed for each other.
Yeah.
Set up the karaoke in the living room, had some colored lights, busted out the tequila, and
we made a very, very, very exclusive bar/nightclub out of our living room. And enjoyed quality time that way together because, if you can't have like the crowd sort of interaction, you could at least have the verisimilitude of the environment. So yeah, we created that together for each other because that's one of the ways that we consider quality time.
Yeah, really important pressure release.
So let's talk about the fourth one, words of affirmation.
So it's saying supportive things to your partner, right? I mean, that seems pretty understandable. You got to say nice things to the people you love.
I think that you're a very intelligent person for saying it like that.
Oh, I thank you.
Yeah.
And I appreciate how you expressed that sentiment, and it means a lot to me.
That's because I'm also very intelligent.
You are also very intelligent and empathetic. Oh, super handsome.
Searingly handsome.
I mean, the way that shirt looks on you, you are.
It obviously has been washed.
It smells good.
Well,
Yeah.
so far.
So far, it is kind of warm in this room.
Can't wait to turn the AC back on. So let's get back to number 4, the words of affirmation.
So, words of affirmation, they feel good to most of us, but for those whose primary love language this is, they are absolutely crucial. One of my girlfriends, I was talking about her earlier, whose partner's love language is receiving of gifts.
Right.
Her love language is words of affirmation.
Okay.
And it was really difficult for them to understand why they weren't connecting for a while. He not only finds it difficult to express positive, words of affirmation, he doesn't want to hear them himself. So when she would try to show love to him by saying, "Oh, babe, you look so good," or, "Oh, babe, I really appreciate how you did this," or, "Oh, honey, you're so smart," and it makes him uncomfortable.
Wow. He sounds to me like one of those guys that's like, "Darling, words cannot express my deep love and affection for you, so have a Ferrari instead."
Pretty much. If he could, he's like, "I'm just going to give you something, and that should pretty much sum it all up for you," right? I'm putting words in his mouth, obviously.
It's okay. He's a quasi-fictional character to illustrate a point.
He's not fictional at all. But I think they actually, I don't know if they read the book, but they did the 5 love languages quiz and figured out what their respective love languages are. And since then, they've been able to get on the same page and understand how the other person expresses and needs to receive love. And he has gone out of his way to fill that need for her,
That's great.
Yeah, no, I absolutely love it. They have a really great relationship.
That's really great.
So there are different ways that one can, share words of affirmation.
Yeah, what are the ways to share words of affirmation, Heather? Elucidate.
I'm sorry, did you say elucidate or hallucinate? Because it is getting a little hot. I might be saying
It's
things
getting a
in
little
here.
warm, but I said elucidate.
Okay, just checking. So different ways. You can simply send a little text message. Thinking of you, you looked super great when you left for work this morning.
That's nice.
Right?
Yeah.
Little
Text message with kind of a flirtatious gesture kind of thing.
Yeah, making it specific, I think, is really important because it means that you're actually paying attention. Again, being present, being conscientious, leaving a little sticky note under their pillow. "I love the way you look in the morning," or, when you wake up. Like one of those simple things that it just means the world.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I think words of affirmation is kind of up there for you.
It is. I'm a words guy.
Yeah.
I try to express my appreciation for you verbally. I don't think it's even a try. Let me rephrase that. I just express naturally my appreciation for you verbally because you're a bit of my muse. You're you're poetically beautiful, so you kind of induce that in me.
Oh. And I'm not as good with words, surprisingly, so I have to make an effort of it. But because I see Marco expressing himself, I feel him expressing himself to me verbally, that means he kind of wants it in return, So I have to remind myself to say the things that are bouncing around in my head.
Well, it's not that necessarily that I want to be praised, but sometimes validation is just good. The words of affirmation are really important, and that's definitely the love language we're talking about here. But there's also this dynamic in successful relationships that's all about the exchange of elements of validation. Everything's like a bid for validation or a granting of validation, and it's in the balance of those that a successful, let's call it, emotional economy within a relationship runs. So, I do a very, very nice thing. You say thank you and acknowledge the fact that I did a very nice thing. You do a very, very nice thing. I say thank you and acknowledge it. And there's no shame in actually asking for that exchange of praise.
None
It's
whatsoever.
like, hey, I did a thing. I would love for you to tell me that you love it. you know?
Actually, yeah, he did that this morning. He made this audio file and he's like, hey, I worked on this super late last night. And before you get distracted, I'd love for you to check it out and praise me.
Yeah, I flat out was like, I want your praise.
I was like, okay, I hear you. Let's pull that up right now. And here's your praise because you deserve it.
So within the context of this words of affirmation, love language, that is kind of sort of the interchange between the two. There's this other resource that I can't remember the name of that talked about like the interchange between the petition for praise and the giving of it. And that's, I think that nestles pretty naturally within the words of affirmation love language. It's sort of like the technique by which that can be most easily balanced.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Absolutely. No, I love it. So, and then the final love language that we're going to talk about today is physical touch.
Oh, yeah, baby. And we don't just mean sexual touch. Physical
No.
touch is just being close and, letting your interpersonal space overlap with the other to the point where you are, your skin like rubs against each other, like when you're crossing the kitchen together, when you're in the living room and just hanging out. Maybe your toes are touching while you're both reading your books or tablets or whatever. When there's need for physical touch more than that, say, for example, you're having a particularly distressing day and you just need a supportive shoulder to lean on or cry on, just be there for that person.
Absolutely. I mean, there's that sign. What is it? We need like 15 hugs a day.
Yeah, we're going to have to look at that before I can say with any authority what that number is. And I'm sure it slides up and down depending on who you really are. But 15
Sure.
or 30 hugs a day sounds like a really good idea.
Well, and also length of hug. Now, we're not talking about making things awkward, and we're not talking about invading a person's space or violating boundaries.
Right. That's like more like getting needy.
Absolutely. And that can definitely be needy. But if you have a partner whose primary love language is physical touch, then you need to find ways to show them, to really reinforce to them, to validate that you love them and that you find them attractive.
Yeah, and that's one of the languages that you and I utilize more of than others. And each one of these is like a different dial. It's like 5 dials. It's not like you're all one or all the other. It's more like you're like 30% this, 60% that, that kind of situation.
That's how I look at it.
Yeah, that's
for
the way I
sure.
look at it too. And physical touch is pretty high on the list for us. We are always hand holding. We're always cuddling. We're hugging. I kiss your cheek 100 times a day. You turn around and you touch and caress me all the time. We high five each other all the time. Our toes are touching in bed. Even though we don't cuddle in bed, our toes are touching. It's that kind of thing.
Gotta at least have some sort of contact.
Yeah.
And, just finding little ways throughout the day, as Marco was saying, it helps keep that sense of intimacy. It keeps that sense of closeness. Connectedness. It keeps the fire stoked. Now, for women, it's pretty well known that we tend to be kind of like wrapped up in our heads a lot, and that sex for us it's a very mental, it's a mental space, right? We need to be in the right mental space to feel comfortable and to be able to enjoy intimacy.
And it can be pretty mazy.
It can be
getting
pretty
from that-
mazy.
From your everyday point to that end point.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why, more women read erotica than men, because we need it in our heads, right? So it's all about getting our heads into the right spaces. So if your partner is a woman and her primary language or love language is physical touch, if you can kind of keep that on a mild simmer throughout your day, if you can just walk past each other in the kitchen and like kiss her on the cheek or, rub her back as she's taking care of something, if she's bending over the kitchen table to grab the salt shaker and you do a little playful grab of her booty, obviously within, personal boundaries and all
Consent,
that.
guys, consent
Right?
is golden.
For sure, there are times when I'm like, babe, not right now. I'm brushing my teeth. This is not erotic. But it can keep
Leave
things...
my butt alone. I'm trying to tie my shoelaces.
But it can... It's just awkward. But it can definitely help keep things stoked.
It's like a low-level form of foreplay. It's
Absolutely.
It's like keeping the burner on.
Absolutely. No, don't let things burn, and make sure there's enough sauce in the pan or whatever. But yeah, keeping that going so that when it is the time to get down to more intimate play, she'll be there to meet you.
Because the atmosphere has already been primed with all of these minor intimacies.
It's not coming on cold.
It's like micro intimacies instead of microaggressions, you know?
Oh, so much better.
So much better. Micro intimacies. I think we're going to have to patent that.
I think so. I like
all right,
that a lot.
Listeners, don't anyone write that down, because that one's ours. Microintimacies.com, okay?
Okay, well, before we release this, you're going to have to, trademark it or whatever.
It's okay. I'll forget about it. So, yeah, the 5 love languages.
Yeah.
Each one of them is very important to someone, and each one of them is a task for their loved one to learn to navigate.
Yeah.
And it's just a really good way to start. Obviously, it's a lot more nuanced than that, because everyone has different dials up and down for each one of these love language settings.
Mm-hmm.
And each different person is going to want to experience this language in a slightly different way.
Mm-hmm.
Someone may like the gifting or receiving of like yachts and sports cars and gold jewelry or whatever. And some other person might just want like, look, I made this little paper crafted thing for you.
Yeah.
For example. And just in that same vein, somebody that receives words of affirmation may be more into getting praised for their deeds than for their physical self.
Sure.
So you want to be aware of the kind of person that you're in love with and the kind of person that you want to heap love upon in these languages.
Absolutely.
And to figure out what particular part of the spectrum they're on for each of these settings too.
I look at it as a fun journey of discovery, just like with all of love. If you can get to know your partner in a different way than you had previously understood them, and you get to play with all of these forms of love expression and find ones that work for you guys.
Indeed.
That's a beautiful thing.
You and I were kind of lucky, and I'm very thankful for how lucky we are that when we did originally hear about the 5 love languages, at least for me, it really sort of connected in my brain. I was like, oh,
Well, yeah.
right.
That makes all the sense.
Makes all the sense. And it really helped explain shortcomings in previous relationships, for example. It helped explain where a couple of relationship tragedies happened, even. So it really is helpful in being able to diagnose where problems might be lying. But it also is just a fantastic way to streamline the giving and receiving of love credits in your life, It's really a fantastic method. I'm all for it.
I'm all for it also. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this episode of How to Love Forever. We hope you guys resonated with the information, and we're super excited to hear what are your love languages and how are the different ways that you express love within your relationships.
Yeah, find us on Facebook and comment about it. Facebook.com/How to Love Forever. We've got a cool little group over there, and there's all kinds of discussions going on with regard to the topics of the podcasts, etc. We are also on Instagram. If you want to just follow on Insta, it's how2 Love Forever. And if you feel like being amazingly generous and becoming a supporter of the arts, it's really easy to do that. For us, it's on patreon.com, and you can find us as How to Love Forever. And we would greatly appreciate your help with that. As always, I want to thank you for spending time with us and for listening. And I want you to love hard.
Love deep. Love forever.
Get out of here.
Bye.